Once an object is in edit mode, it has a lot of properties that you can go into. Keep in mind, this is not a poly mesh. These are not polygons you're staring at, kind of. I mean, if it was a poly mesh, you could actually edit it in some fashion with manipulation of brushes. But for right now, if you click on it, it's going to let you know that you cannot do this unless it's converted over to a poly mesh. Now, before I show you how to do that, let's kind of look at what you can do with these. Okay, if you go to the initialization palette, okay, we have different properties that we can change upon, like the height of Z and Y and the coverage of a 360. So, you know, if I go in here, I can get 1/2 of the circle if I just have 180 in here. And I type in 180, I get 1/2 a circle. Okay, and this has to do with the subdivides that go around the object. So in here, I could just easily go in here and make a lower res object. Okay, so let's go back into 360 for a second. That way when I take this subdivide down, it actually makes sense. So you can see I can get a lot of weird shaped objects through every one of these, because every one of these can become many different types of objects. Take for example, this one can easily become some kind of spike. Okay, just by lowering this one down. This is really handy later on when we start using Projection Master. These tools are not good to sculpt on. Okay, they're good for little tiny projects along the way with Projection Master to build and sculpt geometry, but these are not to be sculpted on unless you want a really wonky looking model. Take for example this. I have here a 3D sphere, and if I went into make a poly mesh, I can now sculpt on that, and I can use a standard brush and sculpt on that, blah 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 blah, and you're like, ooh, that's so freaking amazing. But what I'm looking at is, you know, this area right here. Okay, what I have here is a polar cap. And this polar cap meets in a very tight configuration of polygons that are non-uniformed. Non-uniform polygons are your worst enemy when it comes to sculpting. These will always bite you later on. When you have, I've seen people turn this ball into an amazing character, just the ball itself, but surely that does not have the good structure of something that you want to model with. You want to model with something that has perfect squares going all the way around it. So instead of this, I'm going to show you how to basically make those 3D objects that are good and uniformed. Now anytime you make it into a poly mesh, of course when you go back to the initialization palette, you'll find that it is gone. So you have to go in here and you have to make those items like this, and then you hit make a poly mesh. Now they're good to go, and you can find out that these are nearly impossible to sculpt on. Okay, now that you know the difference between a poly mesh and a 3D object, and the fact that initialization only works on non-poly mesh, let's get into the understanding of what a unified skin is and how to make good geometry.